It's fun. They've just launched it on their app. So, hello and good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in. Welcome to Adagio Live. Welcome to another segment of Conversations with Claire. This is such a great series. I'm so happy to be presenting today one of the most important people in my musical life as part of the show. And for all of you out there who are tuning in, I'd also like to highlight a new update in the Apple iOS app of Adagio. So from now on, you no longer only have to watch Adagio Live online, but in fact, it is also available within the app. Simply open the app, and then you will see the Adagio Live in the top banner. Click on that, and then every evening you can tune in to conversations, master classes, and even short performances by your favorite artists from around the world. So welcome, Professor Arie Vardi.
Hello, Claire. So nice to be with you.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. It's a great honor for me. You know, so many people, I think the question that I get asked the most is, what made you move to Germany? Why did you leave America and go to Germany when you were 17? And I always say, yeah, to study, but for my professor, Arie Vardi, and people are astonished.
The reason is that I wanted to meet you. You know, it was written in the stars that I have to meet you in Germany. So that's why I moved. And last time I hosted you on my show. Now you are hosting me on your show. And I must say that I watched a few episodes of your Adagio, and it's fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. I just want to give a little bit of background information that I met you, Professor, in 2006 in a piano competition. Where else? I was 16 years old and we were far off in the Far East in Japan, as a matter of fact. And I had performed a few rounds in the competition. And when I was eliminated, Professor Vardi came and spoke with me. And then I attended his master class where we worked on a Mozart fantasy. And I will never forget that was the moment that I realized just how far this journey is, how much I still had to learn. And from that moment on, I was really very clear and determined to move to study abroad. And it took some convincing, but now here we are, 14 years later. I moved to Germany in 2007 to Hanover, and I am still living in Hanover, and I'm still very often performing for Professor Vardi. So this is great. And today we are going to speak about one of the pieces that I have some of the best memories of working with him. So we will be speaking about the Ravel left-hand concerto, Ravel Concerto in D. This is certainly the less popular one. When we think of Ravel Concerto, I think most of the time people would think of his popular, humorous, light-hearted Concerto in G, which is a wonderful work. But for me, the D major concerto has always held a very special place in my heart, and I've had the chance to perform it a few times. But first, let's hear from Professor. Maybe you would like to give us just a little introduction about your thoughts about the piece.
Well, the concerto is orchestrated for an incredible orchestra. If we look at the score, we can see not less than 24 wind instrument, and the left hand must now fight against. This is not concerto for piano and orchestra. This is a concerto for piano against orchestra. If it is reflecting war, then there is here another war. It is the war between the piano and the orchestra, a huge orchestra. It is as big as Daphnis and Chloe, is the biggest orchestra Ravel can write. And here is just one hand, how this one hand can fight against. And besides, we mentioned it, you and me, that this is the only one piece we know that you have to play from this note to this one, from the bottom to the top. It means all 88 keys with one hand. Tell me averagely how many keys each finger must play?
On average?
88 keys for 5 fingers. So each finger is responsible averagely for 20 keys. Isn't it amazing? And then on top, fight again the whole orchestra and reflect Ravel's terrible experience of the war. So this is in short the story of this concerto.
Yeah, that's perfect. You already highlighted the two main things that we will speak about: the physical performance of this piece and how it's so different. I think just from a pianist viewpoint, there are not many pieces just for the left hand, and there are no pieces just for the right hand, even though the right hand is more, I would say, for most people, the primary hand. And I must say, I very much like the way that Professor described this piece as a piano concerto with the piano against the orchestra. Are there other concertos or pieces that you can name that kind of have that same conviction, that same character?
No, I would say that this is the king and the queen of piano concertos for the left hand. And may I just follow your thinking by saying that the left hand alone is much better than the right hand alone, because if you play the right hand alone, then you have to play the melody with this little finger and all the time jump to the little finger, which is so dangerous. On the other hand, if you play the melody with this finger, it's heavy by nature, and the emphasis on the melody is so good. So the left hand by itself is much better than the right hand by itself, and that's why many composers, actually not many, but few composers wrote for the left hand and none for the right hand. You are right to mention it. So the left hand by itself is not at all handicapped. She's
No, I would never say it is, but I do think it does take a special kind of training. It's certainly a piece, this piece in particular. It's a piece where one has to take time to really experiment and try out different positions of the hand, because I think everyone plays it differently. I myself have seen a few live performances of different pianists playing it, and there were moments, some of them, they would hold on to the one end of the keyboard, to give them some stability. Some would sit very straight and very kind of good posture, but somehow clenched up and without flexibility. But different things work for different people. And it took me a very long time, I must say, before I really felt comfortable and at ease, because going on stage, I think my very first time playing this piece, sitting there while the orchestra is playing this huge tutti, which we'll get to in a minute, and then preparing for the very beginning, which is going from the bottom note of the keyboard all the way to the top. It's a feeling which, no matter how much you practiced, it will never really feel right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the hand feels more comfortable not doing that. Because if you do this or that, that's okay. But if you have to do so, that's very bad. So tell me, where exactly do you see it while playing it now? In which?
Well, this is something we had talked about in lessons, and I think you gave me one of the best advices someone can have. Probably the most important advice. You said to never sit in the middle of the keyboard, to rather angle yourself more on the right hand side of the keyboard. And I at first didn't quite understand that, because I thought, well, if I sit in the middle, I'll have equal distance from the top to bottom. But that's not the point at all. Finding the right balance for this piece is also finding your center in your own body. And that's certainly not the right point. Many times I actually use either my left foot or my right foot, depending on which foot I'm using to pedal, as an anchor. And it gives most flexibility when one is sitting on the right side, because all the moments when you're leaning towards the left side, it's much easier than leaning towards the right side. So that was a great point.
Yeah, sorry. There is another thing. This concerto is very rich in skips and jumps. So you really have to adjust your torso left and right. But the danger is, don't you dare to move the torso during the jump itself. Because like in every sport activity, if you shoot to the basket, you try now to be steady. So you have to take a good position and then to be steady. And this all happens in no time, in a nano of time. You just take a new position, you move your little behind, and then you are ready, and then you don't move anymore for a fraction of a second, and then you move again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are some points, I think in this concerto, I can demonstrate a little later, where literally the jumps are all the time. Every other note is moving 2 or 3 octaves. And it's such a movement, such a moment, the more you move, the bigger a distraction it is. And you have to really have found this kind of where your body is weighted down, and then to just keep calm and believe in your hands, believe in your hand, excuse me.
Tell me, are you willing to play for us some of the jumps of this concerto?
I would be. I'm not quite warmed up at the moment, but I thought we could start from the beginning of the piece and then move to those jumps. I mean, even in the very first soloist entrance, we have a lot of jumps. And there's one part which I think any pianist who has learned this piece, they know it's a nightmare to play. And it's almost like a lottery. One can practice and practice, and sometimes it works out great, and sometimes it just doesn't. You just have to have faith. But yeah, let's, maybe we can just go from the very beginning, because the beginning of this piece is, for me, so epic. And that leads us right into what we'll also talk about in addition to the technical point of playing the piece, but also just the story behind it. I have to admit, Professor, I learned this piece when I was still in America, and I had seen it in concert, and I thought, what a cool piece. Like, how cool it is that someone just plays such a powerful, I recognized the power immediately. But I didn't really know the background story. I knew, of course, that Ravel had composed it for Paul Wittgenstein, who had lost his right arm in the war. And Paul had asked Ravel to write a piece for him that he could perform just for the left hand. And so I understood, of course, that connection. But apart from that, I saw it as such a special piece, which is only for the left hand, which is somehow so virtuosic on a whole nother level than other people playing Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky. It's a totally different kind of music. And there are so many jazzy elements, which I took to mean groovy, rhythmic stuff. But then, of course, when we started working on this, you helped me see the historic aspects of the piece and the real, let's say, the core. And I would love it if you could tell us a little bit about that. And I think one hears that just from the orchestra opening, right?
Yeah, so it starts De Profundis. It's so vague, we hear nothing like this. And then the contrafagot, the bass bassoon. It's so scary. It's like prophesizing a whole cloud of threat, so threatening. And then the horns come. Reminding us a little bit like a complaint, like a sigh motif and so on. And then it is growing and growing and becoming more and more heroic, like a majestic saraband. And it's all just to pave the road for the soloist to show that he's not only a protagonist, but he's a real hero. He's a war hero. He's a warrior. So the left hand is becoming as a symbol, as a military hero. And I shall gladly hear how you do that. It's really so amazing.
Well, I will do my best. Yes, this growing into the soloist entrance, it's inspiring on every level. When one is sitting there listening to this orchestra, I think you really get taken in with the tutti, and by the time it's your turn to enter, basically I think it's like an explosion. It's an ultimate declaration. And well, I will try to play it. Let's see.
Thank you. Thank you. It's amazing. This concerto is indeed so heroic. You feel the war, you feel soldiers just marching on the bridge, left, right, like a... And on the other hand, you feel the lamento and the sadness. And yeah, I wanted very much to tell you the sadness of my last concert in Israel. And I don't think it's 100% relevant, but you know, 7 weeks ago, we played a concert in Jerusalem, same orchestra that you know, that you and me played together there. And I was the conducting, and there was the Schubert unfinished. And still we could run the concert. The second concert, next day was canceled, but that evening we still could play it. And we did this Schubert, and it is... And we all cried a lot, hoping this was not the last concert. And you know, I think of the second theme in the Ravel concerto that comes soon after what you played.
Yes,
and,
I was just
and there is a similar sadness of Schubert, and maybe with little hope, with little light at the end of the tunnel, that there will be some peace on earth. But actually, there were only 20 years of peace between World War I and World War II. But I would love you so much to play these sad sounds of Schubert, where the left hand is playing the melody with one finger and then accompany itself, and it sounds like 8 pianos, 16 hands, so rich, one hand.
Yes, so this is really the section after the orchestra tutti, after the soloist entrance, where the tutti has this very heroic, triumphant almost sounding like a kind of march going in, and it ends, it disappears, and the piano comes in with this heartbreaking melody.
Claire, that was fantastic. And I remember the funny game I proposed to you to do in the studio, that I played for you in two hands and in one hand. And you don't look at the piano, you are blindfold. And then by listening, you tell me, did I play it with one hand or two hands? And then we exchange the roles. And then I blindfold and you play it one time with left hand and one time with two hands, but don't cheat. And then let's see if one hand can play independently the melody and the accompaniment, like a real nocturno for two hands. And you did it now wonderfully. You have a nice piano.
It's from all the times of working in the studio together. But I think this is really one of those moments where the accompaniment line, there is a lot of jumping, and it's kind of, you have to always keep your hands stretched out, yet the top line has to be so peaceful, independent, and just kind of flowing without any distraction. And it is something which works really well after one knows how it sounds with two hands.
I am so glad you said it. I'm so glad you said it, because sometimes when we have these crazy jumps, everybody must see the jumps, because the name of the game is the jumps. Here, if you play it well, nobody should notice that there is any skip. It should be as smooth, because if you play it in two hands, look here, one hand is just floating and one hand is playing the melody. And if you play it with one hand, you are actually in a panic to come on time, but not at all. Nobody should take notice of that.
No, and even just this melody, I think, was one of the moments that I worked on the most in this piece, because it was just so difficult to find this exact balance, and to have this stillness, to find the right stillness. Anyway,
and needless to say that the whole melody is played just by one finger. No.
And I have to say, it's also quite interesting, just in general, like we have these beautiful harmonies. Basically, you have a lot of these modulations which just only come from someone like Ravel, and it's immediately recognizable. And I would say, like, this is one of those pieces that in the beginning, it's not typical Ravel, but when this theme comes, one can recognize the composer immediately.
Yeah, is Ravel of Once Upon a Time, is Ravel of Merlois, the modern Ravel. And may I just say, in addition to the left hand, there is another big helper in this concerto, is the pedal. Because pedal for impressionistic style Debussy and Ravel is more important than anything else on earth. But for the left hand concerto, even more so. Because if you play two hands, you still can hold the notes.
Yes.
If you just jump one minute here, 1 minute there, how can you keep the melody going? And how can you keep the harmonies
somewhat clear? Yeah.
So if we need big virtuosity of the pedal, I cannot find any other composition that pedal is so well required and should be so carefully done. By the way, do you take the pedal with right foot or left foot?
It used to always be right foot, always. But last year I played this piece, and for the first time, there were some moments. The one I played now, just this moment, I use left foot. It depends. There are just however you feel better positioned. And so I feel this flexibility that I can pedal, the right pedal, the sostenuto pedal, with either right or left foot. And it's fine for me because I actually practice very often also cross-legged. So I'm used to using the left foot there.
Yeah, but we must just make it clear that we don't refer to the una corda, to the left pedal. We refer to the right pedal played with the left foot because of the sitting position at the keyboard. And needless to say that if you do so, then there is not one foot free for the left pedal. So you have to make sure that Yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to tell you that once I played a Hammerflügel, a period instrument,
Yeah.
old keyboard, and the pedals were the opposite way. So the right pedal was what we do in the left pedal, and the left pedal was what we have to do in the right pedal. And this was so confusing to control. It's easier to play like this than to do that.
Yeah.
And there was no way you can play it like this.
Typically, is that the way it is? Hammerflügel, is that just positioned like that normally, or was this a special instrument? Because I thought always the sostenuto usually is on the right side or right knee on some old instruments.
Yeah. Yep. It's the left hand, the Pour la main gauche concerto requires a lot of new tricks. Really, a lot of new tricks.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, just it's changing all the time. I mean, also just from a technical point, this is not a left-hand concerto, which is one specific kind of technique. I have to say, I've recently worked on the Prokofiev left-hand concerto, very different. Also, of course, very difficult, encompassing great deal of the keyboard and going up and down all the time. But from the practicing point, I learned that one much faster than this one. It could be that after learning Ravel left-hand concerto, you can play any left-hand repertoire pretty well. But definitely I would agree that this is kind of the king, queen of the left-hand repertoire.
And I would like to say something very important. We pianists, we are preoccupied with the left-hand ideas and how to do it. But we should always remember that this composition is perhaps the most meaningful composition for Ravel. This composition, all his composition after the war are reflecting his terrible experience of the war. In the year 1914, Ravel was already too old to be a soldier. He was almost 40 years old, but he wanted to volunteer. And he volunteered and he became a driver, and sometimes driving wounded people, ambulance driver, and he saw all the horrors of the war. After the war, he was mentally and physically so injured so that he had to go for a long vacation in Switzerland to recuperate. They called this disease that he had neurasthenia or something like this, that he was completely exhausted, weary, worn out. He couldn't do anything. And later on, few years later, he started to compose more and more. And then came the left-hand concerto. And the left-hand concerto is on one hand reflecting all those horrors, and on the other hand is kind of pacifist manipulation and manifestation to say, listen to me, don't fight anymore, let's have peace. It's like an outburst for peace on earth, which never existed, by the way. You know, you read Stefan Zweig, Die Welt von gestern, you read Marcel Proust, À la recherche, the same period, and you know that Ravel, he really described zeitgeist in this composition more than anything, better than any book or anything. So in spite of all the difficulties, once we sit and play, the difficulties are gone, that we don't care about it. We care about this extraordinary message.
Do you think that Ravel had some premonition, let's say, of what was to come? After all, this composition was really written right in between the two world wars. And yes, it is a manifestation, but perhaps it's also a warning, would you say, for what was to come in about 10 years?
You know, Claire, we spoke about it so many times. The meaning is in the ear of the beholder and also in the mind of the beholder.
Yeah.
You know, for him, any composition was artistic, musical, pure music. but music is much more than music, and we cannot imagine this period and what Ravel during the war. By the way, he also lost his mom, who was very dear to him, and just whatever could be terrible was terrible. So this, and he was so hypersensitive. So I strongly believe that this meaning that we relate to this composition, you and me, is what it is. But of course, as some people can come and tell you, no, it's not that. I remember during the war, as escapism, he wrote Le Tombeau de Couperin. And I feel Le Tombeau de Couperin is a very sad piece with a cloud of sadness above it. And some other people think, oh, it's full with joy. So as I said, the meaning is in the mind of the beholder. Also, maybe when a composer writes a composition, he had something in mind, and post factum, more and more meaning came into reality, and that what it means for us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is one of those pieces how I said that my perceptions of it changed so much just from learning more about Ravel, reading the letters that he was writing to his friends and his mother during the war, filling your mind with these images and then creating your own, let's say, musical opinion of a piece. It adds so much. It's kind of like knowing the background story of something makes you see a piece in a totally different way. And I think this is one of those pieces that once you know the backstory, it makes also just for the listeners a multi-dimensioned thing then, because everyone can relate to losing loved ones. But of course, we can't all relate to what he saw, to like maybe getting lost. I think at one point his lorry broke down and he was lost in the woods for 2 weeks, just surviving on whatever he could find there before someone found him and rescued him. I mean, these are existential crises that we are so lucky that we don't have to go through such things at the moment. But through this music, perhaps we can hear just a little bit of what he was going through. And we can also hear that despite his small stature as a person, we also hear that in his music, he has like an iron will and a kind of drive, which is able to really get everything across.
Yeah, iron will, good definition. Actually, there are quite a few war-reflected composition by Ravel. One is La Valse, that, by the way, starts in the same neighborhood here, like, you know, and then even the same mi, the same E that is starting pour la main gauche, and all from De Profundis, and became very violent at the end. So there is a La Valse, and then there is the Le Tombeau, which is, as we said, is escapism, is just, it's so terrible around me, so that I would like to go somewhere else. And then there is Pour la main gauche, and Pour la main gauche, our concerto, your concerto. By the way, how many times you played it?
I don't know, I guess 10, not enough, not yet.
Oh, so you know, this concerto maybe is the best one to express the war. Why? Because it is my instrument, it is my piano, there is the whole orchestra with me and against me. And yeah, and it is for Wittgenstein, who lost his arm in the war. So it's everything to say, yeah, this is the piece that reflects my terrible experience during the war, and also the post-trauma. I believe that the rest of Ravel life was a kind of post-trauma story. Very.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, actually, was he the first to write a left-hand piece of such a size? Was he the very first left-hand piano concerto? And how was he as a pianist? I don't think he was exactly the most accomplished pianist. He wasn't a concert pianist, but for someone to compose this incredibly dense, difficult work for a left hand, it really needs, I don't know, special mind.
I never made a real research for the roots of the left-hand repertoire. We all know the Scriabin, and there are some more. Yes. Is a grand concerto with big orchestra. By the way, we never mentioned that the form of this concerto is not at all like a concerto. It's like a fantasy, one Lisztian fantasy, and it looks all like Liszt compositions. So once you decide to write for the left hand, so you are preoccupied with the idea that the left hand can do anything, that there is no limitation. Now, Ravel was not a piano virtuoso, but he had an incredible talent to write for each instrument in the best way. When he writes for the harp, it's like a born harpist. When he writes for the violin, like he is a born violinist. When he writes for the contrabassoon here, is like a contrabassoon a player. He really could write for. Look how he wrote for the trumpet in the piano concerto for two hands. Just instrument gets the best dedicated part for him. So when Ravel decided to write for the left hand, so his instrumental talent just was sharpened so much to discover all the inner secret of this hand. And I think we pianists will learn a lot from this concerto about the secret of the left hand. What is the left hand? What actually is the left hand for us?
I mean, there are techniques that we incorporate in this piece, which I don't think are used in any other composition. It's a piece where in the past, or in my past, there are people who have told me it's wrong if you're using this part of the thumb, but in this piece, there are no limits. You really have to extend your own physical limits, and anything, let's say, is possible. And obviously, I mean, when Ravel wrote this for Paul Wittgenstein, who had lost his arm, just think of this handicap, like overcoming this handicap. Anything was possible then.
You know, Claire, you mentioned in the beginning of our interview that we met in Hamamatsu in Japan. And I remember you were 15 and you played Fefole by Liszt. And this was one of the best Fefole I've ever heard. Means that you are a natural virtuoso. Just you are a born virtuoso, and now you sit and play Ravel pour la main gauche. Was it difficult? Was it difficult for Claire or not really?
It was very difficult. It was absolutely very difficult. I can't play those pieces like I used to. I'm already double that age practically. So thinking back now, I also learned the Ravel left-hand concerto when I was about 15. And I'm very happy for that because I think this is one of those pieces that one should learn when they are younger. You learn so much just to play the piano, to develop new techniques for the left hand, because I think, of course, the left hand isn't equal actually, but people still will always think, and also when we look at just our hand muscles, there are more muscles in the right hand than left because the right hand obviously plays more notes than the left. And this is one of those concertos that I think I spent a long time, not just getting the notes, but to find a position that works for me, that I'm able to play it without getting cramped up. I think this is one of those pieces that can lead to certain hand injuries from over practice. Would you say so also? Would you agree that?
I completely agree with every word you said. And I hoped once we decided that you are going to play this concerto, that it will not create any difficulty for you. And now I understand that you had to work.
Oh, absolutely. I was happy that I went through most of the tough stuff before we met. So I had already learned it. It was in my hands and I had learned the technical side of playing it up to a certain point. And then...
Yeah, I want to say that the cadenza of this concerto is something incredible, because here he incorporate all kinds of techniques, not only jumps and leaps, not only chordal, but also the arpeggio, the real secret weapon of Impressionism, because Impressionism, ever since Miroir and so on, is a lot of harp, like patterns, fabric, texture. So I think it will be fantastic if you play for us a little bit of the cadenza, because if you play some part of the solo, then the orchestra is missing. But if you play the cadenza, nothing should be missing.
Oh, I would try not to miss too many notes. But yes, this cadenza I also just want to say, because I did last week a segment on Mozart cadenzas with Kid Armstrong, and cadenzas have always held a fascination for me, because we're performing with this great group of musicians on stage. And the cadenza is the moment where the orchestra is silent, and it's our moment to, so to say, shine. And most of the time, I think the cadenza comes at a culmination moment, one where expectations are so high. And this one is, for me, probably the most culmination-y possible. There's a couple of very big cadenzas out there. I mean, there's the Prokofiev 2 cadenza, which everyone knows. It's massive. It is a force of nature. But that one also is in the first movement of a 4-movement piece. This concerto is written in 1-movement form. It's in a fantasy form, basically. And the cadenza comes at the end of this huge fanfare from the orchestra, where I think the orchestra is playing 100% tutti, everyone's playing, and the piano is playing, like trying to get some sound out. I think it's a moment where we have to give 200% of our strength, and still, most of the time, it's very difficult to be heard at all in that moment. It's that really depicts this war struggle, the struggle, let's say, of trying to be heard in this kind of outburst. And this cadenza, it starts off so calm, so tender, full of despair. And I'll try now to just play a little bit of that, but I'll probably stop pretty early. Haven't played it for a while. Let's see.
Yeah, thank you. I loved it so much. And you said full of despair, yeah, longing, yearning, pleading. It starts in such a delicate way, and then the horror is overwhelming, and then it's funny that there is no official end of this cadenza. The orchestra just is gradually becoming more and more involved, and so on. And then this outcry of is it a defeat? Is it a triumph? Is it just saying, I love to live, I love life, let me live, let me something, and then you hope that this will be the end, but not at all. What is going to be the end? Can you show us this in the piano,
exactly.
Yeah, like the hell with this, or maybe the war will come anyway, like a terrible prophecy. And you know, once when I played it, I was privileged to play it with Paul Paré, one of the greatest conductors of France in the past. And he communicated with Ravel and with all these composers. So I played it with him, and once it was, and then at the end, I wanted just the last note to play with my right hand, just, you know, as a protest of all that. And I asked his permission. I said, I was a young boy, even younger than you. And I said, Maestro, okay, can I just play it with a right hand? He said, oh, no, don't do it. And so on. And have I told you once what did I play as encore piece?
Yes. And I'm keeping it in the back of my mind,
Yeah.
but please share
Yeah,
it.
I think it's a good idea. Can you tell our viewer what is the idea?
Oh, well, I wanted you to tell, but
is to play Bach first prelude from the Well-Tempered in left hand, which is possible. You just make it etc., and it sounds fantastic left hand.
I think that after this piece, it is such a fitting, it's almost like peace has come, you know, now we're in heaven, a little bit like this. Yet, from a technical standpoint, after this huge, intensive playing, to go from that, when most likely your left hand is a little bit shaky after the concerto, to go from that to playing this tranquil prelude, which everybody knows perfectly. So if there's even a slight hiccup, people will notice. It's scary, it's risky, and one day I hope to do that as well.
Yeah, please do it. And you know, first the public, they don't understand why you do it.
Yes.
And then they start watching, and if you can feel the public, if you have a way with antennas to feel the public, then you see how they just inform each other. Look here, what's going on. And you know, actually, come to think of it, this is the only one composition by Bach that I know that with left hand.
Yes. I checked it out. I mean, after you told me this, I found it a very inspired idea. I looked at it and I realized, well, that would take the same amount of time as working on this concerto practically, but definitely a wonderful idea. Yeah.
But you are right. You are right that after the concerto, the hand is so shaky that you
have to go many bows, many curtain calls to relax and then to play.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Professor Arie Vardi, for your time, for your insight, for your inspiration, for me and for all of the viewers out there. Thank you for joining me. I would also just like to say that we've put together a little playlist for all of you on the Idagio Live app. So if you go on it, there is a list of pieces which we've also suggested listening to together, of course, with this Ravel concerto. There's also the Tombeau de Couperin, which we talked about, with this the 7-movement suite dedicated to a fallen war hero, for every movement to one of Ravel's friends. Ravel La Valse we also talked about, and Prokofiev No. 4, because this is also a concerto for the left hand. These are, I think, the 2 biggest concertos for left hand, and well, I love them. They have a special place in my heart. So thank you so much, Professor. And you're right now in where are you now?
You are asking me?
Yes.
Oh,
Where are you speaking
I'm
to us
sorry.
from today?
Sorry, the sound was not so clear. Yeah, I'm at home in Tel Aviv. I enjoy my time and pleasure to be with you. Where are you? At
I am
home?
right now. I'm in America. At my father's place. My sister is also here. It's family time. And well, Professor, I hope very much that we'll be able to see each other again soon.
Yeah,
in Hanover.
soon in Hanover. And
exactly.
you know, very often we say the pleasure was all mine, and we don't mean it seriously, but this time I really mean it seriously. The pleasure was all mine to be with you. You are wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much for watching Adagio Live, where classical music happens, and join us next week and every evening for different fascinating conversations. Thank you.